All right, cool. Lots of UK folks, US folks. Love it. Well, why don't we just jump in and get started? Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Shabelman, a partner at Stories Inc. and your host for today's session. I also have Bernadette in the wings here helping us with some things in the background. So if she pops in, she's here helping. Thanks so much, Bernadette. Today's webinar is brought to you in partnership with Happy Dance Careers websites, and we're really thrilled to have them as a partner in this session and just in our work together with different client career sites. And thank you for joining Career Site Secrets today. We're really looking forward to sharing what we've collectively learned over the years about career sites and what makes them stand out. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A part on the bottom panel of your Zoom screen. Bernadette will be monitoring those, and we'll try to answer questions throughout if they're things that are relevant to what we're talking about. So as we get started, we've got just a quick poll because we're curious for you of what's happening in your life with career sites. So we've got a question here about what your biggest challenges are, what biggest challenges you're facing with your organization's career site. So the options are too hard to make regular updates, lacking enough content, relying on stock photos, or not enough metrics to show ROI. Feel free to pop in and choose any or all. It is like a horse race here. It's neck and neck. All right. Cool. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. And it looks our results are too hard to make regular updates as the winner, with relying on stock photos coming in a close second, then lacking enough content and not enough metrics. So all these things are things that we're going to dive into a little bit more today as well, but it's nice to know where you're at in your career site journeys. So as I said, I'm Jill Shabelman. I'm joined today by two industry experts who are two of my favorite people, and we're here to share all the things that we've learned from working in the talent acquisition and employer brand space over many years. So Brian Adams. Brian is the CEO and founder of Happy Dance and also the author of the popular employer brand book, Give and Get. Brian, you want to do a quick intro and share why you're here with today?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, great to be here. And Jill, you're one of my favorite people as well, I've got to say. I'm here today because I'm talking about something I'm just passionate about, how to get the best out of your employer brand. We're talking about storytelling and most of all, candidate experience, which is the origin story of why Happy Dance exists. So super excited to dive in. There's lots of great content to cover. So I won't hold us up anymore.
Perfect. Great. And we have Lauren with us. Lauren's a partner and co-founder at Stories Inc. Lauren, tell us a little bit about you and what you love most about career site content.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm a co-founder of Stories Inc. One of the things that I love the most about career site content is no surprise employee stories. That's my very favorite. Employee experiences that differentiate the employee experience.
Awesome. That's great. Let's jump in then. So as we get started, we're just going to do very quick intros about Stories Inc. and Happy Dance in case you're not familiar with us, but I promise we're getting to the meat of the session in just a minute. So if you're unfamiliar with Stories, Stories Inc. is an employer brand content agency that specializes in employee storytelling. We help organizations uncover authentic stories and then talk about their culture. And from there, we create videos, blog posts, other digital content to really help you share that story across talent channels, including career sites. Over the past 12 years, we've had the pleasure of working with amazing clients, some who you can see on the slide here, and we love sharing what we learn along the way. So if you're not already part of our newsletter or following us on LinkedIn, definitely follow us or subscribe. We love sharing everything that we've learned over the years. And with that, I'll turn it to Brian just to do a quick intro on Happy Dance.
Sure, thanks, Jill. So I know I don't look old enough, but I've got a 20-year career in employer branding, and I've had the privilege of working with over 200 global brands in that time. And halfway through that career, we faced a problem of implementing employer brand globally. And the biggest asset of that was career sites and the technology that existed at the time. And actually still looking around the landscape now, as many of you just confirmed with your answers to the poll, the technology wasn't able to implement an employer brand to the best of its capability. So we started building Happy Dance out of frustration and a need for our own team. So now Happy Dance is its own independent company. We specialize in creating career sites that don't just inform, but really inspire. And our focus unsurprisingly, is elevating employer brands through compelling storytelling and innovative candidate experience. So I'm proud of the technology, but I'm proud of the team. And what those two things add up to is an obsession with candidate experience. And I think we're going to share some of that with you today.
Sure are. Great. Thanks, Brian. All right, so here's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking about some of the common career site challenges and how that impacts your work and the candidate experience when people are looking for opportunities at your company. We're going to share 4 secrets that we've learned along the way, and knowing these secrets and how you can apply them to your company can help you with a more effective career site experience. And as a bonus for being here, we just created a new 9-video mini course series on how to create a great career site. So all that's coming to you after today's webinar so that the learning doesn't stop here. So we're going to get started by sharing some challenges that the Happy Dance team has seen when working with talent acquisition or employer brand leaders, some which are similar to what you all faced earlier on the call. But Brian, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the market or hearing from your clients in terms of the challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, sure. So feel free to put those on the screen. Let's start by acknowledging the core challenges facing career sites today. I think we can all agree most companies struggle to make their sites engaging, informative, and personal at the same time. The bottom line is candidates expect more, and these stats demonstrate that: more relevance, more interaction, and more authenticity, seeing what's behind the curtain and getting a really good idea of the employee experience, warts and all. So I think these stats summarize most of the common pain points that we see inside companies when trying to create a really impactful career site. So I think these challenges highlight how critical it is to create a career site that goes beyond a static experience. Analytics help us refine our candidate journey. Without them, we're flying blind. And if you think about it, 85% of EB leaders struggle with personalization, and that tells us that there's a real gap in connecting on an individual level. And that basically boils down to a huge loss of opportunity for more engagement.
Yeah, definitely. And these challenges that we face with career sites definitely go beyond these numbers. These issues do have a real impact in whether your site attracts and converts the right candidates. Bernadette, if we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So some of these things of why these challenges matter, like having that lack of insight or having data gaps, it's really hard to measure if your message is resonating. You don't know what candidates are engaging with most, and it makes it difficult to refine or prioritize the things that you do want to create. And the lack of insight into how candidates are finding your site really hinder your top of funnel marketing efforts to find the best ways and optimize candidates getting to your site. The no personalization or limited personalization, as Brian just mentioned, is tough. And when every candidate gets the same experience, your site really fails to speak directly to their needs. That means a manufacturing candidate's getting the same experience as a marketing candidate, and that just feels like kind of a disconnect. And it's really not showing them what's in it for me. And then having sort of a bland design or using templates means that you have probably a generic career site that looks like a lot of others, and it doesn't help you stand out or be memorable to candidates who really want to be excited about applying for an opportunity. So we're going to dive deeper into all of these, but I do think that these are real issues and challenges that we should think about. How do we tackle these in the work that we're doing? So as we jump in, we also want to share what we think great looks like, because I think that's a really helpful framework to think about where are we headed when we talk about having a career site that stands out. So we've got 2 quick examples. Brian, tell us a little bit about why you think the Canva site stands out.
Excuse me while I choke. What's interesting about this, before I jump into telling you why I think this is great, is we're actually talking to Canva about the next iteration of this. This is how much they're on the ball and how they're keen for their shop window to, if you like, to be really fresh and engaging and so on and so forth. But for me, this is still a marquee career website that really leverages what they stand for from a brand perspective, but also using really authentic content. All of the photographs are the team at Canva. They're called Canva Notes, which makes me chuckle every time I say that. But it's filled with storytelling, it's personalized, and it's engaging around the brand. And more than anything, it really does paint a realistic picture of what you might find inside Canva as an organization. And I guess I'm biased, but I'm just really proud of the work that my team has done, because I just think it is a beautiful example of a careers website.
Yeah, It definitely is. I love it. We've got one more example here too as we get started. Tell us a little bit about this one, Brian.
So Criteo, we really took the time to understand the EVP and the employer brand of Criteo, and they've got such a personality. It was important for that to come across. Again, very people oriented. So it was important that we could communicate the personality of the organization, but then very quickly allow candidates to dive in and get to the heart of the matter in terms of finding a team that might be relevant to them and hearing voice of the customer or voice of the employee. So again, this is a beautifully dynamic career website, but it takes you down rabbit holes of employee stories very quickly, and it's just a nice experience. Different to Canva, but great for a different reason. I would advise check them out if you want to see what great looks like.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Brian. All right, let's get into our secrets as we think about how to create a great site like these. So all of these tips are based off of the work that we've done over lots of years and things that we're seeing in the industry in terms of trends. So Lauren, tell us about secret number 1.
Yes, secret number 1 is your job isn't just to attract candidates, it's also to help them select out as well. We've talk about a lot as an industry. And this is actually really sometimes hard to do. It takes some bravery because of course we all want to share what's great about our organization. But the reality is you don't want every candidate. Your recruiting team and hiring managers want the right candidates. And you want the ones that are really going to get excited about what you're doing. And so that means your career site content should give candidates an honest, behind the scenes look at your company culture, values, and work environment. And this helps them decide if the company is right for them and whether they're excited to work there or not. And especially in today's job market, there are applications often outnumber the number of open roles, and the opt-in, opt-out strategy is really important. And your recruiting team can easily get overwhelmed by overqualified candidates. So you won't really want to focus on those that align with your needs. And I would also add, it is just the right thing to do as a human, because, yeah, exactly. Because you want to set the right expectations for candidates about what it's like to work at your organization. And you do a lot of harm when you paint a picture that isn't real and you don't reveal the things that really make your organization what it is. So for those candidates that are opting in to apply, when you are really clear about what the culture is, you actually extend you make sure that you're retaining them longer because you're setting the right expectations. So how do you align the candidate expectations with employee reality? So the first is to talk to your leaders and hiring managers and find out who's thriving in your culture and on teams and in specific jobs, and then who's struggling. So conversely, the exact same. You want to find out the people who are thriving and also the people who might be struggling, so you can understand a little bit more about your culture. And for example, if your company values a consensus-driven culture, candidates who enjoy collaboration and iterative decision-making and moving fast may thrive or who may thrive, and then those who actually prefer clear directives may struggle. So you then would want your content to reflect what the culture is really. And then in addition to, once you understand what your culture is like, auditing your existing content. So is what you've learned consistent with what you're saying to others? And then making that plan. So reviewing your career's page map and outlining what content you need to tell the real story of organization on every page. So I'd say that's the step to making sure the expectations match reality.
And Lauren, do you have any other examples? You said this is hard to do, but when you think about having this opt-out content, what does that look like, or how do you actually really do this? I think we all agree it's important, but how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's making sure that you are using employee stories of the people who are thriving and being very clear about what's going to work for one person versus another, maybe even telling some of the unsuccess stories. I know that in our team, often we try our best to have that front and center on career sites, but we also have it further down the candidate experience as well. So you can get more specific about what that content's. I would also ask Brian, do you have good examples of clients you've seen who've used content for candidates to opt out?
Yeah, shameless plug. This is essentially what I've written about here. Give and get. But typically what we find is if you are upfront with the harsh realities and adversities of a role, typically that will make unqualified candidates opt out quickly. But what we also find, and this is a sort of added bonus, if you like. Those who see a sense of purpose, impact, and belonging in the challenge that you present will actually lean in and find that proposition of that role more compelling. We're actually split testing on a number of career sites at the moment, and I think we get something like 12 million impressions across our portfolio every month. If you're confident enough to put the top 3 reasons not to apply for a role on a job ad, the percentage of valued applicants will go up because people will start to opt out. But it might be that your team is, it's a lean team, there's high pressure, there's no egos, there might be aspects of the environment that isn't for everybody. You touched on a few of them, Lauren. Every organization is different. The key is to be upfront with them and be confident enough to position those adversities and harsh realities or challenges such that it almost dares people who have got what it takes to thrive to really lean in. And then from a storytelling perspective, if you tell stories of, when I first joined this organization, I really struggled with X, but over time I got help from team, or I learned to do this, or I leaned in and I grew as a person. And now what I've found is, positive result, then people can start to imagine themselves going through that arc and that journey as well. So usually the harsh realities are a phenomenal opportunity to tell a very engaging, interesting story.
I agree. And I know that when our team creates culture content, my favorite is the kind that's polarizing there, or I clearly would not. I would not thrive there. So that's like the measure of success is when, at least from our view, when we're working with so many different clients and sharing. We have one client that said something like, work-life balance here is we get Sunday off. And that was a really harsh reality that it's good to share, right? We have our work-life balance is great. We do the work in 6 days instead of 7. Like, okay, good. I'm glad that we've shared that.
Yeah, I'm out.
But agree that that's a mark of success when you can share that content. And again, we know it's hard because we want to always talk about what's great about our organization, but it's not doing a justice to candidates and your career site either.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for that discussion. It's really helpful. And Brian, we've got a couple examples here of other content that you all have seen that really does help paint a realistic picture. So do you mind talking quickly through Domino's? And then we've got one more example here too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd encourage people to just simply look at this, but Domino's does an amazing job at showcasing what working there really feels like. So it's not just what you do, but it's who you do it with. The stories are honest and relatable, which helps filter candidates who wouldn't fit their fast-paced environment. So it's a very simple approach with Domino's. It's a global organization, but easy to drill down to an extremely local level quickly on that site and find relatable local stories. Yeah, and it's as simple as that, with Domino's, and it works really well. It's made such a difference.
Yeah, great. We've got one other from Grab, and this one is more on like the job listing, job description level. How do they help paint a realistic picture?
Yeah, so again, this is about locality. So their approach emphasizes regional context. So candidates see that Grab has a specific presence and an impact and a culture in their locality. So again, it really drills into the authenticity and making it super easy for a candidate to imagine themselves in an environment, in a situation, and just get a little glimpse of who they might work with, the type of language, the vibe, and that kind of stuff. And the layout and the rich content at job description level on this site, there's a lot of effort gone into to create engaging, localized content right the way through this one as well. So
yeah,
definitely check that out.
I thought forever that job descriptions are the lowest hanging fruit to actually get people good information, because that's where people find your jobs and find you so often. And when we give them nothing there, it's just such a missed opportunity. So these are really great examples.
I think if you polled this audience now, they would probably tell you one of the biggest frustrations is the crap that ATS spits out and the lack of control. But you're right. A job description page is like a product page on e-commerce. It's the sharp end of candidate experience. And it's also the biggest impactful opportunity to just compel somebody for 20 or 30 seconds with a simple human story that makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Great. Let's move on to number 2. Lauren, tell us what secret number 2 is.
Well, it's clearly where it's at for me. employee stories, real employee stories are what engage and convert candidates. So you can have the best EVP tagline, and we respect the EVP, or career site copy, but leaving out real employee stories really is a miss because it doesn't allow you to prove that you are who you say you are. So absolutely using real employee experiences in lots of different ways all throughout your career site is really important. And we know this isn't news to this audience, but you may need to convince others that employee story content is where it's at in our work. Sometimes we do have our clients that can say sometimes, oh, maybe we should do less. And we're like, no, more stories, more proof. And so here's some really great data that you can use. So we know that candidates are 13 times more likely to start an application and eventually be hired after viewing video content on a career site. And candidates are 23 times more likely to start an application and be hired after reading a career site blog. So this data shows us that employee stories on your career site directly impact candidate quality, and this is from Clinch Research. So you want to create engaging content that tells a real story of your organization through the experiences of your people in order to find more people who will thrive there as well. So this is also really interesting. So our team did some research earlier this year. We reviewed the career sites of the Fortune 100 Great Places to Work to see how they use real employee stories. And so here's research that we conducted, and here's what we found. 52% of Fortune 100 career sites use real employees and professional photographies on a career site. And when you don't do that, it's harder for candidates to picture themselves there. So real photos, we know we've been beating that drum for a while, but that's very important. Real photos of real employees. 63% of sites feature at least one video showcasing company culture, and 75% of those featured actual employees. So that's good news. But this is some bad news. Those videos were created more than 3 years ago. And that really hurts my heart and my brain because you know that your culture is different today than it was 3 years ago. That content really does need a refresh. And what this actually, all this data means, like what this research means, is that not everyone is leveraging high quality, authentic content effectively. But if you're committed to creating fresh, real culture content, your career site can truly stand out from the competition. The bar is still really low. Just look at these statistics. There's lots of room here for us all to collectively improve, but you to take advantage of that and attract the right candidates. And if you'd like to see more of this research, Bernadette, maybe you can drop the link in there because I thought our team did a really great job. It was a lot of work. Okay, your career site needs employee stories. So this is something we talk about all the time. Without the real experiences of your team members, your career site risks feeling really generic, like it could belong to any company. And employee stories matter because they're proof that of your culture in action. It grounds your EVP, the things that you say that you are, and people promises and real experiences, and it offers candidates insight into what it's like to truly work at your company. They also create an emotional connection. Specific personal stories resonate with candidates, helping them picture themselves in your workplace. And one of my favorite employee story rules or definitions is that your company plays a supporting role. Sometimes we say your company is a character in the story. They're not. We know that the story of the employee is the star. That's the meat of the content you're creating. But it's important to show how your company has supported them and has made their life better. If that's part of the story, it's important to also tell that piece as well. But there's real differences between a testimonial and a story. So testimonials like we're like a family, or I could bring my whole self to work. I think people who say that are well-meaning and so that shouldn't be discounted, but it's a real opportunity to find out what has happened. It lacks a lot of depth and it doesn't give candidates a clear picture of your culture. Here's an example of a testimonial, which is again, valuable, and that's great, but you can also dig a little bit deeper. So in this case, if someone mentions a sense of community, ask them to share a specific moment where they felt that connection in action. So actually have that story to illustrate that feeling. In this description here, Yanni's quote talks about the Manila office, and she uses great descriptive language to highlight a sense of community, but you could again ask her for a specific moment that brought that community to life.
Great. And let's bring stuff to life a little bit more. So we just have a quick video example. We love to share examples when we do these types of things. This is the culture video from AARP. It sits on their careers website. It's like one of the first things. And it's a great example of how to use some stories to really share what your culture looks like in action. So we'll play this and go from there.
It feels really good to me that I'm able to work at a place that has great people, has a mission. We use the latest and greatest tools. Finding the place that has all three of those things is a little hard, and I'm very happy that I found it here.
The culture of the organization is very welcoming. It's a community.
To work at a company where I feel like I'm part of an ecosystem really allowed me to feel good about being with my mom during the most difficult time. This place helps you do it with some genuine courage. We have caregiving hours. I was able to spend time with her and know that when I came back, I'd be able to pick up where I left off. I got help and support from literally everyone. I recently wrote thank you notes to people. The email you sent or the note you wrote made such a huge difference every day.
The work from home and the hybrid option, a lot of times that makes it a lot easier to get to my fitness classes. Being able to do things that I want to do gives me more energy to come back the next day refreshed.
I'm stretched, I feel busy, I feel stimulated. I'm enabled to pursue this graduate school despite my busyness at work. AARP really allows me to get it all done.
Diversity and inclusion is part of our DNA because you come up with a better answer when you have a lot of different people with a lot of different views and they can all collaborate together.
ERGs at AARP are numerous employee resource groups. They are creating a warm and friendly, safe space for employees who belong to the ERG to gather activities, engaging staff from all across the United States.
It is really important to be able to experience some joy at work. It's actually not that hard here.
What makes me happy about working with AARP is the work that we do. To do a job where I'm supporting my personal goal as well as the organization's.
Work happy.
Work happy?
Work happy.
Work happy at AARP.
So that video packs a ton in for sure in a short amount of time, but to me, it helps maybe shatter misperceptions of what I would think it's like working at AARP. It looks like an actually pretty fun place to work, and I wouldn't have guessed that without seeing this video or like reading just copy on a career site. Well, let's keep moving on then. Lauren, we've got one more example here of a career site refresh and what that looked like for BAE.
Yes. So here's another example of a career site that we like. And we created career site content with BAE Systems Inc. And they recently refreshed their entire site, as Jill was saying, with updated employee photos and a suite of videos sharing the actual employee experience. And what's cool here is there's 11 videos throughout their site that talk about the universal culture content, as well as what it's like to work in a specific team, as well as what's it like to work in a specific job. So there's tons of employee story content, and it's personalized to the experience. And there's lots that you could, I think, Brian, you were saying the rabbit hole earlier. There's lots of things to dig into the more you learn, and there's lots of places depending on where you are in the journey too and who you are. But I thought they did a really nice job here. And there's tons of content throughout their site, and it's all employee story content.
Great.
So to wrap this section up on employee stories, here's some final tips for you. The first is to use employees across all your content types, so photos, blogs, videos, clearly, and more, and then create as much high quality, and by high quality, of course, it's engaging visually, but also substantive with employee stories to create a positive impression with candidates and to give them as much insight as possible into your culture. And then lastly, feature employees who represent who your organization wants more of, and give those employees a chance to share their true, genuine experiences about the work. And as I mentioned, that also helps paint give a real expectation of what it's like to work somewhere. And that's a really important career site tip.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lauren. All right, Brian, let's move on to secret number 3. What do we have here?
Ooh, well, secret number 3 is about personalization. So candidates are expecting tailored experiences these days. So let's explore how we should provide that. So the role of a brand is to differentiate, increase relevance, and be more memorable. That's what we're trying to do when we're presenting branded experiences. Now, with personalized content, we get to achieve that faster, but you also increase trust and, as Lauren's already mentioned, an empathetic emotional connection. If you can do that, it means people are leaning in, they're investing in your content, and they're more likely to apply or opt out, which is also okay. Personalization can actually aid that effort as well. So this causes your audience to better imagine themselves in the shoes of the actual team that they might be joining. So personalization, it isn't just a trend, it's an expectation. And if you think you're up against a talent competitor, you're also up against other branded experiences like Netflix or Amazon, or people have come to expect an element of tailoring and empathetic thought to really make best use of that branded experience. And this should reflect the interests, preferences, and priorities of your audience. So, for example, using dynamic content to serve specific job family videos based on what a candidate has been showing interest the most on your careers site is, a great example of how you can start to personalize and tailor an experience. So let me just run through a couple of examples here. On a job description, there might be some generic information about a team. Afterwards, there might be customer videos or content served up within the job description based on a specific role. Once the career website has identified what the interests are of a candidate based on the behavior on the site, job family content, you can imagine, rather than generic imagery and generic videos and messaging, specific videos, testimonials, and photos of a day in the life of that team and that family really does help to demonstrate to the audience what it could be like from their perspective. And the career site experience, if it's the same for every candidate, you're missing out on an opportunity to, first of all, keep them on the site longer, engage them, find content that really appeals to them, and help them efficiently get to something. Think of it as like a concierge, get to what matters. Remember that the role of branding is you want to differentiate to capture attention. It's about being relevant. And this is where personalization really comes into play. Your role is to demonstrate a relevant experience. And that means serving up what they care about most. So the faster you can identify that and serve up tailored content that's specific to what they're wondering or searching for, or something that's going to inspire them or be the most relevant, that's what we're trying to get to. Ingram Micro, the best way to experience this is to experience it, but there's a sequence of images here, and the best way to just walk you through it quickly without wasting any time is essentially when you go to this site and you start to look around the website and you show interest in a team, a location, or a job, you can actually set the sensitivity of behavior in Happy Dance. But essentially, the careers site and a personalization engine will start to learn the audience's preferences and priorities. If you hunt around this site and then you go back to the homepage, for example, it won't be generic content. It will be maybe, I don't know, engineering role in Chicago, or it could be something very specific that you're interested in. And instead of vanilla default jobs in a list, it's more jobs that are likely to appeal to you. So serving up jobs in the same job family and so on and so forth. So I could labor on this a little bit more, but you get the point. The essence of this is a career site that learns from the behavior. The more time you spend on the site and show interest in something, you can then start to tailor and personalize aspects of the site to get a better experience. We tend to do that right the way on job family pages, the homepage, job description pages, and your blog content as well. And a lot of careers sites should have dynamic content blocks. And if they're tagged appropriately, if you can put your library of great storytelling to better work, serving up the ones that your audience is interested in the most. How do we create personalized content? Four easy steps here. If you can identify the personas, the top talent segments of your audience. Now, sometimes you might have 12 or 18. When we worked with Apple years ago, we identified 23 different top-level personas. Start with the ones that are the most prolific or the jobs that are going to make the most impact. But identify those personas and make sure that when you're creating content, you're prioritizing content for those personas and then tag them appropriately. If you know what they're interested in, you can start to create your content calendar accordingly. Map the content to each persona and then make sure that there's enough for you to serve up a tailored experience for each. This doesn't have to be done overnight. It can be built up over time. But the more you invest in this, the more you get started. We saw earlier the metrics, and we'll talk about it in a little while, will certainly start to improve, which builds a business case for you to carry on.
Yeah. And I think, Brian, you spoke to this a little bit, but there's lots of different places where you can use personalized content from job family pages, job descriptions, those dynamic content blocks across the site, and then even thinking about the next layer of the funnel, using that in talent nurture campaigns and email campaigns and things like that too. So great. All right, I think we've got one more secret to go through. And Brian, this is you again. So what's our last one?
So this is about metrics. I just alluded to it. I was getting excited and got ahead, but measuring what matters. So secret number 4 is you don't have to measure everything. Let's cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters. I think it's easy to get caught up in the idea that every metric matters, but focus on just a few key metrics like bounce rate, average duration, an application conversion. Gives more actionable insights and something tangible to really focus in on. And here we can see some really key metrics that I would say, if you don't know what to start with, this is a really good starter for 10. For me, the key is not just the data, but the insight. So when you're looking at the metrics and you're choosing a small number of metrics to measure in terms of performance, where you're looking for continual improvement, it's really important that you understand the insight behind them. Visitor traffic and sources. If you've got paid campaigns or you're working on SEO, you could be measuring branded versus non-branded terms. But obviously, typically, traffic volume going up is a good thing. Most visited pages, this gives you an indication of what candidates care about, but it also gives you a great insight into what to start to write about more, videos to produce first, and to really drill into what's working. So from an SEO perspective, that's a great one. What you've got to keep an eye on there is if the bounce rate is high on those pages, then there's some work to do. The average duration, if people are leaving the site really quickly, it means you're not capturing their attention and creating those rabbit holes that we talked about earlier. So that's a really good top level indicator to look for. Bounce rate might be a mismatch of expectations, or it could be that the technical performance of your career site isn't up to scratch. So if your page takes more than 3 seconds to load, every second after that, you lose 10% of your audience. That massively affects your bounce rate. People just can't be bothered waiting and they disappear. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, and a good example of not just working from data, but the insight of what's causing that data. The actions taken, so the level of interest, and this is where you might start to draw how people are journeying through your careers site. And if there's certain pages that a lot of those journeys cross over on, again, it shows you what people are interested in. And then ultimately the applications. It's not always about the most applications, but the number of applications is definitely something to track. And if you can then compare that with percentage of valued applicants and start to look at the attribution in terms of where that traffic comes from, then you're going to really start to learn something about your audience. And again, it'll focus you in on where to focus from a storytelling and content perspective.
Yeah, and there's lots to do with those insights. Those are all great points, Brian, but all those things can help you figure out like what are more targeted recruitment campaigns you can do? How can you optimize your job listings a little bit more? Just overall enhancement of the candidate experience on your site, maybe streamlining the application process, helping people get to that part of the journey quicker. And then just that idea around continuous improvement. So a career site is never a one and done type of thing. There takes a lot to maintain, to mature, to continue to iterate and evolve a career site. So all of those insights should help inform the changes that you make over time, whether that's you make them on a monthly basis, every 6 months, every year, but you should be making changes, and all those analytics can help do that. Okay, so let's just sort of recap where we are here. So your next steps for a standout site, definitely take the time to evaluate your current content against your career site goals. Think about those personas that are really important to you, that really are going to move the needle in your organization, and make sure that you've got content around those personas, both by role, location, job family. Make that plan to create some new or update your content if you've got stuff that already exists. Identify your employees to participate as storytellers, those people who have those rich, authentic experiences that you want to highlight through blogs, videos, testimonials. Obviously uncover those stories, create the content, and match that to your candidate journey so that you're able to use the personalization in the best way possible. And then, of course, like we just talked about, using the time to review analytics and measure what truly matters. All right, so we have made it to the end. Thank you, Brian and Lauren. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we have a gift for everyone from here. Like I said, we've got 9 videos that dive deeper into all these topics with lots of resources to help you on your career site journey. The first video in that series is going to hit your inbox tomorrow, and then you'll start to see those over the next, but it's a really nice way, I think, to continue to think about how can you optimize your career site in the best way. So with that, we can definitely open it for questions. If anyone has anything, you can pop it in the chat or in the Q&A or raise your hand. I'm happy to answer anything or just talk about other things we haven't even chatted about with career sites today. I guess that question for you, Brian, because I know we have lots of clients that are in the midst of this, and I know lots of companies are, of updating the EVP, like thinking about how to refresh that. When you do a refresh of an EVP, like how much of your career site should change when you have something like new messaging or a new EVP?
Yeah, so essentially the way to think about it is it's probably the most effective and the biggest employer brand asset to leverage when you have something new to say and it's your shop window. It needs to be fresh. And I think it's okay to add content, and it can be an and, it doesn't have to be a completely swap out. But a lot of the time, organizations are transitioning and changing so much. The requirements of teams, cultures shift. If people are working from home, or it's back to the office, or there's a new geography that's opened up, or whatever, it's really important to be representative of that organization. Sometimes things that were really true and effective just 6 months ago are actually misaligning with the organization, or not quite accurate or appropriate for where the organization is. So I think it depends on how transient an organization is, but nevertheless, I think the careers website is usually the best excuse to reach out to teams, to engage them, to get fresh stories. My recommendation, for technical reasons, for SEO reasons, from an employer brand perspective, is to just make a schedule of regular and often. And we say an employer brand really should still stay the test of time, because it should be aligned with the vision and mission of an organization. But an EVP refresh, we're moving to a world now where an EVP is refreshed annually in some way, shape, or form.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And then one other challenge that it seemed like a lot of people had at the front end of the call was not being able to update things quickly or to do it themselves. What advice would you give a team that is struggling with being able to update their career site, whether they can't own the updates or they have to work with someone else in the company? Or what are some ways to get around those ideas of it's really hard to make updates?
Well, I mean, This is a really tough one because for us now, it's a basic requirement. It is your shop window. But I think my advice is to build the business case of how detrimental not being able to update a careers site really is. A lot of the time, the wasted hours of doing things manually or the lack of buy-in you'll get from your team offering content that never makes it to the light of day, or it's such a frustration. But oftentimes it comes down to you might be spending a lot of money in a recruitment marketing campaign, bringing people to an old outdated site, and the conversion is shocking. So the return on investment calculation is a great place to start. And usually that's how to get people's attention inside an organization as well. It's a basic requirement these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. I think, I have all the questions in the world. I can ask you a million
there is
more.
one question there.
Yeah. Oh,
What if
perfect.
you're working with small budgets? What tips or guidance can you give for capturing employee stories on a budget?
I would say starting with using your time interviewing employees and getting it transcribed. So taping it, getting it, taping it. I'm still using a VHS around here. Recording, interviewing when we talked about part of the process is talking to managers and leaders about the people who are thriving. So starting with interviewing those employees and then recording those interviews and getting them transcribed, which is very easy to do and very cheap to do. And then highlighting the stories from there. And of course, you can start from a text update. You can most certainly interview on and record visually through video. But I think if you're on a super small budget and you do want to be high quality, even just starting with interviewing employees and getting everything transcribed, so you have all that text and all those stories, and even just getting photos and pairing a quote with the photo or pairing a story with the photo is just a good way to start if you don't have much money at all or time even to get going. So I'd say that's like a baby step of what you can take in terms of capturing employee stories with no money.
Yeah,
I
and I
what I
think
would add to that is if you've got a small budget and you can afford to create one video story in the absence of any other video stories, if it's an authentic story worth telling, then invest in that, put it live on the site, market it with your social channels, and make sure that you're measuring the impact that one little story has. And probably what you'll find is it'll create a ripple of impact that far outshines any of the static, boring content that it is being compared to. And that's a great business case to go back to the company and say, look, if we did more of this is the type of engagement that we can expect. And then if you find one hiring manager that's pulling their hair out because they desperately need more people, and this is potentially the way to do it, then that tiny little budget of one video can soon snowball into more because of the results that it can glean.
I can also say from our experience, that's the best way to get buy-in is that really great, strong story that's a video example, because once your leadership teams can actually see what you want to do and actually see your culture in action and highlighting their people, that's in our experience, it's the easiest way to get people really excited about what you can do and how you communicate culture. And it's just not to say that data is awesome, but there is that emotional reaction to visually seeing your culture in action on video that usually always gets additional dollars and more buy-in across the organization. Brian,
absolutely.
I agree.
We always say data tells you what, but people tell you why. Yeah. And that's where the emotional connection comes from. Yeah, absolutely. There's another question there. Any differences between showcasing stories from on-site employees versus remote and virtual employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. And since the pandemic, we've been doing this a lot. And there are plenty of ways to capture great content from people in person and also remotely. There's lots of ways to do this, but we capture content remotely from people all over the world. And I think the quality obviously is a little different when you're doing things remotely versus when you have a big camera crew in person. But I think getting a real glimpse at people working in their home life, in their home office with their family around them is a really compelling story of what it's like to work at a company if you're remote or hybrid or have those virtual opportunities. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but I definitely encourage you to do both. If you've got both types of populations in your company, you should be capturing content from all of them. And everyone has a story, we always say, and those people include people who can sit in the chair in your corporate headquarters and those people who are sitting in their chair in Krakow, Poland. There's lots of ways to do this, so should definitely do it and showcase them in lots of ways, but it's just the capture is a little different. The content capture is a little different, but you should still activate it in the same way.
I've seen you guys create some amazing, emotional, human-centric stories with remote people who they work with people every day. They feel like they've got work best friends and all the rest of it, but they've never met. And with a great story, and it doesn't have to be anything more than 20, 30 seconds or whatever it is. But if you can demonstrate a human connection between one person and the other, and it's a story of belonging, it's more than possible, and it can be very compelling, even if they're not in the same location. And sometimes it's surprisingly emotional when people articulate how they feel about belonging in a company, especially when they're remote. So quite often it's more impactful. So it's more than possible.
Yep, that's a great point, Brian. All right, we've got one last question, then we'll wrap things up. So from Judy, I don't often see a focus on hiring manager branding, and people work for leaders, not just companies. Great point. Do you encourage companies to create content and stories featuring hiring managers telling the story about why work for them?
Yes, it's awesome content. So we do encourage companies to do leader spotlights, and we talk a lot about hiring manager and leader, especially at the executive level, humanizing those leaders. So talking a lot about their career path, mostly definitely for internal, but also for external, because it does make people want to work for other people when you can bring their experiences to life and they seem like real humans. So I'd say absolutely, we encourage doing leader spotlights and hiring manager spotlights and including some personal details. Again, the easiest way to start is talking about their career and how they got there, because it does talk about work, but it also weaves in some personal elements if you don't have a lot of time. So that's clearly awesome content to have to speak directly to candidates about why they would want to work on that team for that leader specifically. And we talk about that personalized journey too. That's really excellent content to have in your toolkit, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
one of my
thanks.
favorite interviews we did in the last few years is a manager and a person on his team talking. And it was an experience about how this person was growing into a different role and the support that hiring manager gave them to like progress to the next thing. And just like the emotion between the two of them of how much you could tell they cared for each other made me want to work for that person. And so I think there's ways to do that. This isn't just let me tell you about the job and what you'll do. It's let me show you who I am as a real person so you can figure out if I'm someone that you connect with. There's lots of ways to do it.
And Jill, I agree with you too. It's really cool. So I know the question was like hiring manager and leader, like spotlighting them and their experience, but I really have loved some of the content we've created in the last couple of years where we're actually showing that dynamic, the hiring manager and their team member, like in action and actually talking to one another. So we have another example similar to what you were talking about where, we actually had someone ask, why do you like being my manager? And it was like, tears. It was great. It was like, it actually, the answer was highly emotional, but candidates can see what that interaction is actually like. So how does that leader interact with their team? I think that speaks volumes as well.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Sounds like we should talk more about hiring manager videos at some point. People are really into it.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for being here. We love talking about this stuff. We really appreciate you being with us for an hour. We know time's precious, so we really appreciate it. We'll follow up with recording more resources. We'll start to deliver those mini course videos to you so you can learn more on your own time. And again, just thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.